Radio. All right, what's going on? Good to be back. How are you? It's Scott Penfold, and this is another edition of the Loaded Radio podcast. And been a while, but we're back in a big way, man. It is a big episode today. It's an episode for gearheads, okay? Particularly if you're a guitar player and if you dig guitars, okay? First off, going to be talking with the one-time Kiss guitarist Bruce Kulick, who spent 12 years with the band, released numerous albums with them as well. We're going to be talking to him about, well, of course, his time in Kiss. He's also played with bands like Grand Funk Railroad and even played with Michael Bolton for a while. But yeah, we're going to be talking to Bruce in just a couple of seconds. And then as well on the show, we're going to be talking to Johnny DiFatta, who is the main man behind AXN Guitars. Now, I've got him on the show as well because him and Bruce are now working together, and they're recreating some of Bruce's iconic classic guitars from his Kiss era, which you can buy for yourself. So that's going to be really cool. We're going to talk to him because this guy is like he's like the dude when it comes to guitar collections and these custom guitars from the era of the 80s. I mean, it's just unbelievable collection. And yeah, we'll get into more of that as the show moves on. Okay, don't forget, though, to subscribe to this podcast, wherever you're listening, okay, whether it be Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any of the ways that you can listen. Or if you're listening via YouTube, then by all means, subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, give us a thumbs up. We'd greatly appreciate it, okay? It really supports us. But let's get right on to it, man, because there's a lot to get to today on the show. First off, he was with the band Kiss for 12 years. He took over for guitar player Mark St. John, who took over for guitar player Vinnie Vincent, who took over for guitar player Ace Frehley, of course. Now, Bruce was a guy that was involved in such albums as Asylum, Hot in the Shade, and of course, Revenge. His brother Bob Kulick is well involved with Kiss, with a lot of their earlier stuff. But Bruce is joining us now. And Bruce, how did you get involved with AXN Guitars in the first place? Because I know this is kind of like a big deal for you right now.
Yeah, it's called AXN. Okay. And I know he originally started out, I think, in Arizona, and then he wound up in California. You know, he would occasionally have some used ones, and I don't remember how we wound up beginning our relationship or anything, but Johnny reached out to me, knowing that my connection with the kind of guitars that he has a very, very big, connection to, and passion for.
Sure.
And then it was probably right at the start of COVID or right before it, where all of a sudden he ships me one of his creations, you know what I mean? Based on a guitar that I used on the Asylum tour, one of my earliest ESPs.
Yeah. And
it was fascinatingly, the finish was amazing, but not only that, and actually he thought I liked a different neck shape, and there's very, very much particulars in people's guitar, the things on a guitar, you know what I mean, that you like, neck shapes to, the fingerboard material, the fret things. There's so many. It's an amazing instrument that's so personal in your hands. We all have our favorites, right? So in this case, he actually had a more Van Halen neck that he thought I liked. Again, he never had his hands on my guitars from my Kiss years, but he was just presuming, and I was like, wow, this guitar is incredible, and it's so like Fender custom shop. Yet he's just a small company that I love it, but do you have a different neck for it? You know what I mean? And then we started conversations about my particulars with these instruments. And from that point on, we developed this relationship, sharing information about these kind of guitars, but it evolved in a very organic way. And I learned more from this, honestly, from the last 4 years about my instruments and how they evolved, what companies I used and why, and all the details and specifications of them. These past 4 years have been incredible for me learning about it, so it's been a journey together with Johnny in a very interesting, people love guitars from the 80s and that kind of hair metal, from the Charvels to the ESPs to the Jackson guitars is another one, to the Raymer guitars, which Eddie Van Halen put on the map, to Eddie then getting into his own guitars. These, I'll call it kind of super strat designs, have been a passion for fans. And I only think it's been building, actually. And that's not why I'm like kind of really embracing it more. I'm I'm totally hooked too, and I'm fascinated with it. And I still have a few of my favorites, and I still am exploring what makes them so special, if you know what I mean. But Johnny really has studied so much about all those instruments from my era. He went really down the rabbit hole. And yet he's a guy that's, I know he knows graphic arts and things, and he was into specifications, because to build a guitar, you really do have to know certain things about the how the body it fits with the neck, and then tolerances, and then neck radius, a lot of stuff that half of those terms I was aware of, but is not really part of my needing to perform and be a musician. You see what I mean? So we shared a lot of that. And of course, people usually know if a guitar feels good pretty quickly in their hands. And a really great test was just recently, there was a Las Vegas guitar show for the first time. A local store did a guitar and trade show. I'll be honest with you, half of my fans didn't even know what that meant, even if they weren't in Vegas. Half of the people in Vegas didn't understand what it was either. Now, if you're a guitar nut and you read all the guitar magazines, you know what a guitar show is. You know what I mean?
You're right.
There's quite a few really famous ones, especially in Texas, that you think of. I used to go. It's different from a NAMM show, but closer to a NAMM show than a show. You know what I mean? People were saying, "Are you performing there?" I said, no, even though the promoter did have entertainment at night with some really cool local bands. Okay. But the idea was to bring vendors together, and people could bring guitars, buy, sell, swap, trade, experiment, network with these companies. And he had some from small to slightly larger. My booth that I had, I was very happy to have my wife and I there, showing about 6 or 7 guitars and pedals and photos, and of course the KISS merchandise of my era that I like to represent and offer. We had a nice crowd. It was nice, but I was obviously a little bit of an anomaly than a normal dealer, you know what I mean, who's building guitars or selling their whatever it belongs in their store. But I did get the point I'm getting to, and I really enjoyed it, was having a few. Obviously, locals came by because the local musicians are, they want to check that out,
Sure.
And I made sure all the ones that I knew that played. Some I was surprised. A comedian friend of mine, I didn't know he was so into guitars, and he bought a couple of pedals, and I had him play. There was one. I had 2 of my Kulick guitars, which I'll get to in a minute, that are AXN parts. One put together by AXN and one put together locally. I had them play them, you know what I mean? And the reviews were very, very favorable. People got what I was enjoying about them, how good they felt, you know what I mean? And one was for sale, and a guy wisely bought it, okay? And the other one I can't sell yet because I'm waiting for the second one to be created, which I'm very close in having built, okay? And once that one's put together, I'll offer one of them, because I want to have in my collection my favorite of the 2, and I think you can understand that, and the one that sold, which was like a tribute to my Banana ESP, the guitar that I'm holding on the back of Crazy Nights album, which is probably my most revered in my collection connection to that Super Strat guitar. Okay. Yeah. That guitar just explodes with tone, and there's something about it that is just so amazing. Very few people have played it, actually, and I'm still very curious about what makes it so amazing. But guitars are wood, and they all have their own tonal capability and everything like that. So there's factors that you can't create. You know what I mean? Because wood is part of the tone, which is why a lot of the vintage guitars had very special wood that seemed to be, not all of them, but many of them just gave an excellent tone. The old Les Pauls I'm talking about, things like that. I guess I should explain how Johnny and I got to that point, because I wasn't looking to be. I know he's showed his guitars and has hooked up with some other professional players in known bands who are using an AXN guitar. But I think he knew that I had a different kind of ambition. My relationship with ESP I want it to always remain that I'm an ESP guy since '86, like one of their longest endorsers, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I was on the cover of a brochure for the NAMM show back in '86.
So that would have been like just right after Asylum then.
Yeah, it was for the Asylum tour, correct. The Asylum tour went into '86. So really, I had my hands on their guitars in '85. You think about that. So that's why the best thing, knowing how boutique, meaning how limited Johnny was about just fulfilling his own orders from eBay and everything, I didn't want to burden him. I go like, no, I think I know what I want to do. Could you supply me with bodies and necks? And then, even though we put Kulick on the guitars he gifted me to start with, now I'm purchasing these parts and having a local luthiers put it together for me to my specs with my parts and everything. You see, so Kulick Guitars is born, and ESP, they're very okay with that. They get it. What's really interesting is just this entire fact that I was going to their factory. Now, remember, ESP's made in Japan. Okay, then they didn't. They just started having a store, or rather a distributor, here in New York City in '85 or '84. It might have even been a year earlier than that, but friends of mine introduced me to them because I'm in KISS, and they knew I was playing Charvels, which had Super Strat guitars. And the next thing I know, I'm picking a body and picking a neck. You see what I mean? I'm not actually, it isn't a finished guitar. And then all of a sudden I'm talking to Paul, hey, I'm working with this company, ESP. They make like Super Strat kind of things. He goes, try a finish like this. Let me explain it. And I think he came with me there and showed them, and that became the multi-swirl. So
did you play it with Revenge as well?
Yeah, it was on Revenge. Yeah, nice. I had a second one that was white that I used on Revenge too. Very similar. Even my brother got hip to it, and he had one where he put a skull pick guard on it. And I'm sure you're aware Bob passed away 4 years ago. So yes. I have a guitar, and it's every bit as good as my, and just feel and vibe. That was like to him, his banana, but it was his skull guitar. You know what I mean? So there was something about those builds and those guitars, and that's a big part of what Johnny is into and what I've been trying to offer with Kulick guitars now. And because of Johnny's quality of the bodies and necks that he's provided and how much he has shared with me about these instruments, he's way more knowledgeable than I am. I've learned a lot. And what he learned from me was just what my particulars were. That's all. Now, my boutique Kulick guitars have to be pricey because I now know what it is to build a guitar from scratch here in America compared to the import lines, But either way, this is a great opportunity for me to celebrate my KISS years.
Now, speaking of KISS, of course, I do have to ask, how do you look back at your time with that band? Do you look back fondly at your time with KISS?
After I was not in the band, and obviously they went off into makeup with the original guys back in '96, and it was wildly successful. Obviously, I had to completely, rebuild and start from scratch in a sense with who I am and what am I going to do next. So I wasn't always like kind of delving into my 12 years, but time is an interesting thing because as things progressed, they mostly stayed in makeup, as you know, and outside of the two new records that they did during those years, well, they did Psycho Circus, which I was a little bit of a part of, actually.
Yes, that's right.
But then there was, of course, Sonic Boom and Monster First, I think, or I forget what order, either way. But mostly they were just being, a wonderful representation of the makeup band that started, the phenomenon called KISS, okay? Right. Even though eventually, and in a short period of time, it would become Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer, both who I'm good friends with. The attention to my era was, I would say, at best minimal, which is understandable because of the makeup and them representing those songs, okay, more than my era. But it really, over time, made my era more unique and very special to the fans that jumped in on my era.
Yes.
Okay? And there are quite a few of those. There's more than I could ever imagine. Now, them continuing actually is a good thing because they kept Kiss alive. They kept shining a light on this giant band new generations are going to see. And even if they're going to see them in makeup with the $1 million show, they're still being exposed to something much bigger that does represent more than only what they were doing. So many of those people were looking at, what's this song, Tears Are Falling, or what's this, God Gave Rock and Roll to You, or you know what I mean? Or
Hide Your Heart, yeah.
Yeah, or Hide Your Heart. What is this about? So I have fans that I'll take a picture with at an event, and they're literally shaking, taking a picture with me, and they're not even 20 years old yet. So they weren't born anytime during my era, but they got exposed to it and they got hooked into it. And that's thrilling for me. So now, or shall I say, especially since the pandemic, when I had time I was traveling with Grand Funk Railroad for 23 years going,
that's right.
And that kept me from, I still was involved with my Kiss years and I was still embracing the fans, but then I went into high gear really during the pandemic, just out of my own sanity. And I started to dig into the songs that I was known for. I did get the opportunity. Another thing that fueled my enthusiasm was the Kiss Cruises, where my performances were a must on the Kiss Cruise once that started. And that made me realize how special my era was, and still is, rather, to those fans. So celebrating and knowing it, that they're not getting a heaping serving of it from Kiss and makeup, then I get to offer that to them in a very loving manner, So it goes over well, and I think they can tell I'm proud of it. I celebrate it with them, and it's been a great give and take between the fans and myself. And I think that they know I'm the one that's, you're not going to see a lot of drama out of my mouth. I know people try to, in some of the interviews, they try to catch something that might be edgy and they blow it up out of proportion. But
sure, the
fans know that I'm so proud to be a member of Kiss, and that even any of the criticisms that I have, they're nothing burgers compared to my love of this group and my connection to them and the opportunities I had from Gene and Paul and from what they created with the original band.
And and I've always been curious as a fan myself that after things didn't work out with Peter and Ace, and they brought Eric back, who was your bandmate. Why did they go with? Why was Tommy brought in, and why didn't they? Did you get a call at all about coming back, or why did they go to Black and Blues, Tommy Thayer? I was kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and not everyone's aware of some of the backstory. There were I would hear things about them having problems with Ace, and Ace was getting erratic or difficult. And Tommy Thayer was actually tour managing with them. He was on the road with them because even during my era, he was involved with the band, helping with Kistery and doing things for the group. He wrote some songs with Gene, and it was always part of the the inner circle, shall I say. So from what I understood, there was one or two things that Kiss did, not a concert, even though once Ace was almost not going to make it, and they made Tommy get the outfit on. Similar build, tall and thin, and Ace made it to the show. But there were a couple other things they needed to do. I believe that 70s show when they were taping, Ace didn't show up. Tommy get the outfit on.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think there was a private gig too that no one would really know about. One of those things where you go to an island and play for some rich people, and Ace wouldn't go, and Kiss wasn't going to say, "All right, we're not going to take the gig." You know what I mean? So they if they ever had a thought of me, I think they would have known that probably would have been a lot harder. Tommy was younger. There already, if you know what I mean, working with them. Mm-hmm. And Tommy, not everybody knows that he was in a tribute band for fun at times called Cold Gin. So if they would have went to me, I can't say I absolutely would have said no. I miss being in Kiss. I do realize it would have kind of pooped on my era, because then I'd have to kind of play the role of the spaceman and shoot rockets and play more like Ace. I was never given that direction from Gene and Paul, where Tommy knew that it actually was more comfortable with his natural style of guitar playing. He wasn't a Floyd Rose, play some flashy riffs like King of the Mountain.
Right.
That, so I really think I never felt like they made the wrong choice, ever. I always felt that was the right way to go, because then Tommy could assume the role of the spaceman in the group. Eric sometimes gets some criticism like Tommy has, but Eric being behind the drums and having 5 years in the band without the makeup, maybe he gets a little less. I mean, neither of them really deserve criticism, because they're talented players doing a great job. And it was Gene and Paul's choice to say, and now you're the Catman, and now you're the spaceman. Right. It wasn't like, them saying, please, I want to be the spaceman. And to new generations, Tommy is the spaceman, you know what I mean? And Eric's the cat, even though Eric has a lot of credibility from Revenge and MTV Unplugged and Carnival of Souls and all the work that we did together for those 5 years. So I actually kind of, lost the big gig on many levels for the right reasons, though. And I was never fired from the first time. It was simply, we're making, all this money. Now we're selling out, from arenas to stadiums in makeup. So my era ran its course.
Did you ever kind of wonder what it would have been like if you were able to, much like Eric Carr did, develop your own makeup? Is that something that ever crossed your mind, and what you would have been, the character you would have been?
Well, I was so aware of the struggles of any Kiss member with that. Eric was tortured at the last minute. He was supposed to be a hawk and looked like a big bird.
Yeah.
And the last minute realized you came up with the fox. What a lightning bolt decision for him. You know what I mean? Because there have been images of the hawk or something that look ridiculous. Vinny, when they had to change his name from Cassano to Vinnie Vincent, and then Gene, I think, came up with the Ankh Warrior, whatever.
Yeah.
Not easy to do this stuff, even though we know there are enough creative people out there that could evolve characters, just like many comic book series and Marvel things. You know what I mean? There's always new things. I'm so relieved they didn't have to go beyond that. I always joked I'd be the dog. There was a cat. You know what I mean? I mean, during the pandemic, there was a contest in Europe that somebody came up with it's a takeoff of a magician, the Magi or something, and it was, but nothing that I'm just glad I never had to do it. And I get the question, but again, it just wasn't meant to be, and that's fine with me.
Now that Kiss, has played their final show, apparently. And I know you've been asked this before, but Ace and Peter, sure, but why weren't you invited to that final show? That's a question a lot of fans have, because that would have been a great send-off to have you come out there and to have, and of course, Ace and Peter. Like, why do you think that didn't happen?
I really don't know, but I'm certain that no matter what kind of invitations you might have heard at the start of the end of the road tour, which was actually probably 3 years before it happened because of the pandemic, it got very messy. But I really don't believe. I could see possibly discussions with Ace or Peter that didn't go well, but I don't know that for a fact. Do you know what I'm saying? Meaning, there was a lot of posturing from Ace on Eddie Trunk's show about how much money he'd want or this or that, which sometimes is best not for the public to hear. Yeah. But I really think that they were just so in the moment of celebrating something new, which is presenting the avatars, that they just forgot about what I like to call history, which is everyone involved with this group. And I bet they had more things planned for that night that didn't happen. But either way, they could have done more. And I already knew, like, over 6 months before the end show, that I wasn't getting a real invitation. And even I remember one of the big fan clubs from Europe invited me to their event, right? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to New York City. I mean, I'm flattered they'd want me to be there, and I'm sure they were even talking about a reasonable amount of money for me to be at their party. But then I'm in New York City. If I'm going to New York City, I live, in Vegas. If I'm going to New York City, I should be invited by the band, not by a fan club. You know what I mean? Or, even though their intentions were great. So it's a question that only Gina Paul could answer.
I understood. I think a lot of people would have loved to have seen you there, though, just with the history and wrapping it up. In your opinion, what do you think of the avatars? Do you think that's going to be something that's going to pick up? Do you think it's going to do well?
I hate to ever count out the capabilities of creative minds with a lot of money and means. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you think about what the makeup characters represent, I've seen it in comic book form. You know what I mean? There were fanzines even that were drawing them. I was even included, not as necessarily a makeup person, but you know what I mean? Yeah. An art of the Beatles meet Kiss, Asylum era Kiss, stuff like that. But there's something about technology that they have all these really great people who I know the way. I don't know much about the company that bought them, but I know they were very successful for the group ABBA. Okay, so will they be able to recreate that success for Kiss? I say don't count them out, but I don't know what the public will think. You see what I mean? I think there'll always be a certain part of the fans that need something organic, just like maybe the CD will never go away, vinyl will never go away, cassettes will never go away. So you see what I mean? Like maybe Kiss live in person, or even a tribute band to Kiss live and in person still would feel maybe more than an incredible Avatar performance. But that doesn't mean that this couldn't be something wildly successful. I just wouldn't count it out. There's lots of criticisms. I see people saying, not interesting, can't wait. You know what I mean? It's like, but we know it's years off now, years. Yeah. And I'm glad that they're recognizing that to do this right, it might take a lot of years. And let's see what the future holds for bringing people together in an environment to see Kiss put on a show like no other. Who knows? But again, I can't fault them for trying that, because they clearly didn't want to go the route of, we're going to find the best tribute band ever and put them out. You know what I mean? The official, the official Kiss that isn't Kiss, but they're all approved. You know what I mean?
Kiss approved, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Kiss approved. And I know that there were reputable TV shows and producers that saw that as an opportunity for Kiss, and they didn't bite. And I respect that they didn't choose it, but I could definitely see how that could have gone that route too, and they chose not to.
Do you still speak with Paul and Gene at all?
Yes, we keep in touch. And on another note about tribute bands, I have seen some amazing Genes. Okay.
Yes.
I don't know why Paul's voice, physicality, and abilities as a performer is harder. Okay. I've seen some good people singing well and kind of just wearing that, but I've seen some Genes that you could be fooled. Okay. You know what I mean? And there have been even people posting Tommy Thayer as Ace out there. You know what I mean? There's a picture of Tommy as Ace Frehley. But and I've seen some good, both Eric Singers at the Cat and Peter Criss. I just haven't seen any Pauls. So if you're a Paul Stanley as good as Paul Stanley in makeup, I want to meet you. I want to see that. Okay.
When it comes to the rest of your career, I mean, we're talking about Union, we're talking about Grand Funk. It's such a great career. What is ahead for you musically still, Bruce?
Yeah, and I did want to mention the guitar thing, realizing how hard it is and how much effort and how much I have to rely on, other people to make it a reality. It isn't just me creating a song, let's say, or creating a video sharing my anniversary or something, or you know what I mean, or just sharing content on social media. Building a guitar can take like 6 months for one. Okay. So that's why I don't want anyone to think I've gone into the guitar business, shall I say. It's just another facet with my passion for them and them being a tool of my trade. So what I'm hoping now that I left Grand Funk in 23, at the end of 23, and I have no regrets about that. I'm very excited. They're thriving. They're doing well. They got a great new guitar player in my place, Mark Chatfield, who's a friend of mine. And they're still doing exactly what they did with me. But I don't miss that because now I have more time for all the things that are my legacy. So we've already touched upon some of my legacy. Some of it's these guitars. Some of it's all those years, those 12 years with all those records and stuff. So I'm going to continue to celebrate my history with the fans. I want to work on a book. I've already transferred a lot of interviews that were done over 20 years ago that were meant for a book back then, okay, which came to a screeching halt when people were just looking for the Motley Crue, the Dirt. That's not my life. That's not my world. God bless them, but that's not me.
You think being on the road with Kiss, though, that you would have seen a lot of craziness, crazy nights.
There's seeing it, and then there's acting on it, okay?
Right.
I lived really close to Sunset Strip, and I could literally walk to the Rainbow, okay, where I lived for many of the Kiss years. And that whole lifestyle didn't appeal to me. When you're in a famous rock band, everything's there for you, and you can get away with murder practically, between outrageous behavior. But it was never me. You know, I was brought up just wanting to be, I certainly wanted to be successful as a guitar player, but it wasn't so I could, wreak havoc on the world and become outlandishly drunk or crazy. You know what I'm saying? And even though the lifestyle tends to showcase that in a way, it wasn't me. You know what I mean? So I could never have content like the Dirt. It wasn't part of my life. So, but fortunately, music and guitar playing and celebrating. Gene and Paul were never that way either. You know what I mean? Even though they portrayed, in a sense, this hedonistic, behavior. I'm not saying that Gene didn't probably sleep with 3,000 women. I'm sure he did, or 5,000, whatever it was. but he wasn't getting high. He wasn't getting drunk. He was always a professional. Paul as well. He certainly knew the strength of being seen with a sexy girl on your arm and all that. But these people are, certainly their passion for success, or rather their drive for success, was really their passion. Not the getting crazy. So. But my book would tell a whole journey of how I got into. There's so many groups I also work with, and I learned from every kind of part of that, you know what I mean? From each artist, I took something into the next thing. So I was like practically groomed to be in Kiss in many ways,
Well, yeah, I mean, like you played with Michael Bolton, which, what was that experience like?
So, Michael originally was kind of a blues singer.
Yeah.
And then he wanted to get a little more aggressive and be a rock singer. My brother knew him. He was what's considered local. I was living in Queens, so he's in Connecticut, not far, New Haven,
Yeah.
So it's like the tri-state area. And I remember, I'm not sure how my brother met him originally, but I wound up doing some gigs with him. And then he was offered a big record deal from some demos he did, but they wanted him to be a band. They didn't want him to be a solo artist, So he reached out to my brother and I, and Bob didn't like the business arrangement. I still saw it as a big opportunity. So I continue on, and Michael and I started, had a band called Blackjack, okay, with a couple other really talented people, Sandy Gennaro on drums, who went off to play with Cyndi Lauper and many others, and Jimmy Haslip, who was a super talented Grammy Award-winning kind of jazz bass player, Mm-hmm. And we did 2 records for Polydor at the time, not Polygram. And boy, did I learn what it was like to be a part of the record business. You know what I mean? To be in a band signed by a label. Yeah, I almost thought that I would, when you had that migraine the day the record comes out, you know why, okay?
Yeah.
It was just stressful. And as soon as the first album didn't do as well as we hoped, and I knew what it meant when radio didn't support you because of Meatloaf. Meatloaf started out not looking promising, and then all of a sudden they pump some money and the radio stations give a song a shot, and then the phones are ringing. You see what I mean? And then the next thing you know, you're in arenas selling out, and your friend Paul Stanley, who knew my brother, and Bob and I were both with Meatloaf, comes to the show and doesn't get it. He leaves halfway through. I don't get it. You know what I mean? It's Meatloaf. Well, we know the power of Meatloaf and the 40 million records that Bat Out of Hell sold alone. Okay.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So the people had spoken. That didn't happen for Blackjack. So by the time we got to the second record, I think the president was fired. And so all the people that were involved with us got their heads cut off. And we barely got to put out a second record. Although that record was sampled by Kanye West and Jay-Z, which is ironic. But Michael, then we all scurried off into our own corners, shall I say, of our world. And Michael started writing more Blue-Eyed Soul kind of music. And then he tackled a soft rock thing, and I supported him on that in '83. And that's when he did the name change, Bolton, Michael Bolton instead of Bolton. And he opened for Bob Seger, and think about the connection with the fact that he was able to get some shows with Bob Seger, and Don Brewer, the leader of Grand Funk.
That's right, yeah.
Was playing drums in Seger's touring band for many years, and that was one of those years. And the next thing I know, I'm on the short list for Grand Funk. So you see how, everything you do can lead you to the next step, and that one did. So Michael and I, Michael, of course, had that scary health thing almost a year ago, and I haven't heard personally from him, though he has posted that he is improving, but pretty scary, some sort of brain tumor type thing. And I really hope all the best for him.
Of course, another act that you were involved in. I loved Union, man. I thought Union was such a cool uniting of some incredible musicians. And in my opinion, I think that faded way too fast. What happened there with Union?
I'm out of Kiss. John's out of Motley Crue. He did a terrific record with them. Yep. But the people, didn't support it enough, even though some of the fans loved it. And a manager that I met in Kiss, some of my Kiss years were successfully managed by a guy named Larry Mazer. He's not talked about much since Doc and the reunion, but he deserves a definite shout out. And Larry was very instrumental during Hot in the Shade and Onward until Carnival of Souls, and then that was the end of that. But Larry knew John and thought I'd do great with him, and we got together and really did. The chemistry was good for us to write, and we started writing music, and we got a record deal. Unfortunately, when you're looking at that year of the business, 98, 99, it was really hard to get anything more than an indie label deal, okay? And we did it. I thought it was a great debut record, but it was too hard with the indie label to compete. And unfortunately, we did some touring. There were some Kiss fans to support us, but we never got a double bill of any meat, you know what I mean, on it to give us more exposure. So it was a struggle. We did a second record and a live record. I'm proud of all the music, really, really proud of it. There are fans that love it. And John and I, there were a couple other times we played together as Union with a few different players, even one time Eric Singer sitting in when we had an opportunity to play in Japan. But honestly, it was the band that just never got a break.
Yes, yeah. It's too bad because I thought it was such a great band. It was so solid, man. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, of course. Of course, you did bring up your brother Bob, who was instrumental, of course, in your career, in getting involved in Kiss, of course, too. I know you guys as well. There were some troubles before. How was your relationship when he did pass? Were you guys on good terms? Everything okay there?
Well, the most stressful time was the last year of his life. certain things were happening in his life that really had nothing to do with me directly, that I feel, looking back now, it's much easier now to look back, that were just too hard for him. He always was kind of like either way up or way down. Okay. He didn't show the fans the way down. Okay. I'll admit that. Many of them, because he was so grateful when they would get excited about meeting him,
Sure.
and they got to see the good Bob, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there were a lot of demons that he dealt with that wasn't always public at all until that last year when he got a very, very, I think he knew he turned 70 or was going to turn 70. And as far as he was concerned, the world was against him. Okay. Right. It was a downward spiral. I obviously tried to make him realize that there are so many good things going on, and this is not healthy for you to feel this way. And he only continued. In fact, it would amplify it. Okay, you get what I mean? That attitude, to the point where I reached out to. I don't have a big family at all, but I'd reached out to some of my family members, and they were just like, "You got to stay away." You know what I mean? And that's literally what I had to do. And it was very sad, because in some ways you feel like, well, that's family. You so desperately want to help, but if they don't want to listen, you can't. And the scores of very close people, and some of them who knew Bob, that were also very famous, that I had to discuss this issue with, all the conclusions were, this is his choice. You're not going to be able to get him to think better about his life and to stop this path of anger. Okay. I was obviously not happy to see any of it go public. Okay. It wasn't necessary, because it just was showing someone that was very troubled. Okay. And I know in my book, I'll have a chance, especially with the time that's passed, to share some of, I was very quiet when he was very public. Okay. About certain things, claiming, his anger with me and with Kiss and things like that. But I chose to ignore it. I know it was the right decision at the time, because it was a no-win situation, And unfortunately for Bob, I know he always knew until he passed away that I loved him, because I did have some conversations with some people very close to him at the very end who were aware that he loved me and he knew I loved him. But I think the pandemic and all that anger and everything just came to a boiling point. He did have some health problems. He might not attended to it. And I was very, very aggressive about finding out how he died, which turned out to be a heart attack. Okay. Right. And I'm a firm believer in the mind-body thing. If you're tortured enough and you have some weaknesses with your physicality, it will kill you. Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And I think if his mind state wasn't there, and maybe had more frequent check me out, doctor, you know what I mean, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And again, it's not like I had a conversation with his, cardiologist, but certainly myself and some other people close to the situation felt, did he kill himself? Because he was that, angry. Did he? And what can I say? Black and white. From an in-depth autopsy report, he did not. And it's hard to know, but looking back, how many times he was in such a terrible despair, and it's the pandemic with, May of 2020. You don't know where anything was going at that point.
Right.
Right? If you remember, it started in March. May was just like, Bob had a lot of good plans that might have made him be more positive in 2020, and he couldn't do any of them, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the whole world shut down, and he spent the previous 6 months just being angry at everybody. So what happens? And then there were things with his personal life and his relationship with Stella Stevens that were very hard to deal with. His longtime lover had she had severe Alzheimer's, and was nearly impossible to manage health in a healthy way. She was getting the best care possible. I don't want to misinterpret that. And she lived on 2 years later than Bob, you know what I mean? Which was a miracle, actually. Yeah. But I think we all know somebody that, they potentially have a blessed life. And how lucky they are. But then when you peel back some of that veneer, or rather what you only see on the cover, actually they may have a lot of, like, how does a Robin Williams kill himself? You know what I mean?
Right.
Somebody as talented as that. How does Prince suddenly die? How does Tom Petty just drop dead from pills? I mean,
yeah.
What's going on with these people? And my brother was extremely complex. And I chose, of course, I couldn't do a proper, funeral. It was COVID. And then a year later, it was still kind of COVID. And I decided to do a loving tribute to him in a 20-minute video, called Forever Larger Than Life, Bob Kulick, sharing all his accomplishments. And I didn't get into his anger or anything, but I shared, he had this connection with the gladiator thing. And I think he lost that connection at some point, because the gladiator is going to fight to the very end. And I don't think he fought to the end, if you get what I mean.
Understood.
He got consumed by the anger. And then the whole world was blowing up around him on every way. So it was very tragic, not easy for me to talk about, but at the same time, it was the only way it could end, which is very, very sad to admit. But that's where he was headed, if you get what I'm saying. And a lot of people haven't asked about that. So it's interesting you did. And I'm certainly I certainly have a broader view of it. But I just know, like there's an event coming up in December where what I'm contributing to the Kiss music is not only something from my era, but I'm going to represent Bob on Alive too, because that album's being performed. Because Kiss Can't Say Goodbye is the 3-day event in Sarasota, Florida. Yeah. And then the other night is the solo record. So I'm going to be performing 3 songs of the Paul Stanley record, which showcases my brother's incredible guitar work. And it's an honor for me to represent him that way. And moving forward, I don't want people to remember him as someone that died, with this anger or with this torment. I wanted him to be remembered for someone that was an incredible musician who desperately wanted people to appreciate him. That's important to me. And I know that's what Bob really wanted.
Bruce, again, thank you so much. It's been great, and again, a massive fan. This is one of those things that I'm waiting for a really long time. So I'm really glad it's been able to happen.
Oh, cool.
And
all right.
And I'm sure I'll see you around Vegas at some point.
Yeah, please do. Okay, all right.
All the best to you. Take care of yourself, Bruce. Bye-bye now. There he is. That is Bruce Kulick, one-time guitar player for Kiss, as well longtime guitar player for Grand Funk Railroad and Union, and even Michael Bolton back in the day with a band called Blackjack, as he was talking about. So, great talking with Bruce. And, you can also check out some video footage of that interview right now at our YouTube channel, the official Loaded Radio YouTube channel, at Loaded Radio Official on YouTube, okay? But now we're going to talk to Johnny DiFatta, who is the main man behind AXN Guitars, to talk even more about his guitar collection and him working with Bruce Kulick. Now, first off, Johnny, I do want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today from AXN Guitars. And I mean, dude, you are like one of the gurus of 80s guitars. And I really just want to start off, I guess, for people who don't know, how did you initially get involved with guitars? Like, when did you pick up your first guitar?
I started playing guitar at age 11.
Okay.
And I was inspired, of course, by Edward Van Halen at the time, I think. I don't know. Maybe it was Kiss first. I'm not sure.
Obviously, since then, it's you've gone on to create or to recreate some of these iconic 80s guitars. Now, what is it about the era of the 80s that's so important to you?
I do transcend kind of all the genres, funny enough, lately I've been hanging out with a lot of younger artists that are in hard rock bands that are in their early 20s. And I'm kind of into their music too, quite a bit. But in all honesty, I wanted to be a rock star just like everybody else. And I think that came from my generation. And I have to say, probably it was probably Ace Frehley that really, when I think about it, all the Halloween costumes that I was Ace Frehley, I think way back. So I think that's what did it for me.
That would do it. And you know what? Ace was one of those guys, I think, in my opinion, who was wasn't given enough credit for his playing abilities. He was always just sort of seen as, makeup Ace and stuff like that. But his playing abilities, I think Ace he's right up there with Jimmy Page for me.
Oh, yeah. And, everybody appreciates that. And all the guitar players from Kiss, I think, have an appreciation for, his place in rock and roll history. So.
And, speaking of course of Kiss guitar players, you and Bruce Kulick, I spoke with Bruce earlier, and he had so much to say about him, and he seems so excited to be working with you and AXN Guitars. I mean, he looks really, really genuinely excited about this. How exactly did you and Bruce seek each other out? Like, who sought who out first here?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think Bruce remembers, but when I was young, I went to see Kiss at the Long Beach Arena, it was called at the time, and I was backstage hanging out with them. And they were, it was a short time period, but I actually met Bruce then, and but jump a bunch of decades forward, and Bruce reached out to me because I was already involved in collecting vintage 1980s guitars, and I was well known in the whole internet world. And so he saw the AXN guitars, and he saw some of the vintage I was collecting, and he saw what my influences were, and he kind of gravitated towards me, and then we struck up a friendship, and it carried on from there.
That's pretty amazing, that Bruce Kulick from Kiss, such an iconic band, would sort of, seek you out, which is pretty significant because you've been this collector of guitars for so long. Just for example, currently, how many guitars do you have in your collection?
Well, I try not to actually quote numbers, but in the article from Guitar World, I mentioned that I've sold coming up on 1,800 guitars that I have record of. And I usually own right around 200 guitars at any one time.
Wow, 200. Now, have you played them all?
Well, of course I played them all, but that's a revolving number. But in all honesty, I got all my eggs in one basket. See, right now I'm sitting here looking at 10 AXN guitars that I personally have to play and get ready so that they can ship to customers. So. And that sounds like a lot of fun, but there's days when you got a long day going and you still got to put in a few hours. I try and play all my guitars myself out of a Marshall Plexi on the way out the door. So, and that becomes fun, because I have to put in an hour or two to make sure everything quality control is in place. And so, maybe I'll put on a Kiss song like Strutter or something, and I'll revisit it to get one of these AXN in the case and shipped. So
now, how did you get AXN started initially? How did you get that going? Was it just you opening up your collection to people? Is that how it was started, or how did it really get going?
Well, if you did an internet search for me, you're going to find out that I've been in the scene for a long time as a vintage guitar collector. So, and there was at one period I collected Les Pauls and Fenders, and I got known as the sensei of 1980s guitars by the guys that are well known in that arena, the Les Paul collectors and guys that love vintage Gibsons and stuff. And so they would start to reach out to me to figure out what the hell they had when they'd buy an ESP or, another odd brand like a Fernandez or something that was strictly an 80s brand. In reality, what happened was that, and I learned a lot about running this guitar business from the internet. And I just decided at some point I was going to create my own brand, and I'd already become a luthier. So I started working with 1980 style guitars that got locking tremolo systems, and there spawned the AXN brand.
Have you got any notable guitars currently in your possession?
I do have a few, but I have used a lot of the collateral from those guitars and reinvested it in the business. So, but I have had my hands on some pretty collectible instruments one way or the other. And so, I mean, if you want to know some of the things as far as sticking to 1980s vintage, which everybody wants to talk to me about 1980s vintage, because that's really where my expertise is. I've owned some things that were really prototypes. For example, I owned a prototype George Lynch Kamikaze that was made by ESP when George was mingling with ESP there for a couple years. Nice. They prototyped it in Japan first before they released the different versions of George's guitars. So, and they were pretty interesting. I sold those for a pretty penny at one point. So there, I have owned a number of, and really, I would have to jump forward and say that my two biggest brands, and they're getting more valuable as time progresses, are the Charvel, when they were in Glendora, or as people know it, San Dimas guitars. Mm-hmm. So I had lots of those, and my biggest influence really is going to be ESP as a luthier and a guitar maker. The Japanese guys over there were really doing a lot of things that we didn't know about here, but that laid the groundwork for the unique playing features of a 1980s vintage guitar.
No, that's awesome, man. Now, who are some people that you've worked with or even designed guitars for in the past?
Well, I'm starting to get a pretty big resume of rock stars that I'm working for. But in this interview, I really want to concentrate on Bruce Kulick, because Bruce and I have a lot of appreciation for each other, and he is a great guitar player, and he's spent so much time in KISS that it deserves the recognition. I just saw him play something in Mexico. He's there now, as far as I think. He's there right now. He might be on his way back, and he hasn't lost a beat, man. He's still kicking butt. And
he's killer.
So just the riffs and just the solos that he did were so perfect for KISS at that time. So
I agree. And, I love the Asylum guitar. I got to say, man, that's a phenomenal work there. Describe, tell me about the Kulick guitar. What is it about it? What's significant about it?
Well, I want to go into the story, and I want to keep the audience mesmerized, because if you're a guitar player, you want to hear what I'm going to say. So me and Bruce had a friendship now for a number of years, and I had introduced him to the AXN brand a few years in its infancy, really, when I started this AXN brand of guitars approximately 2015, let's say. And I met Bruce in 2018. So we started talking about the guitars he used in KISS, because he used mainly for a while there ESP guitars, and he had a few that he had made from parts, because he shopped at the ESP shop on 48th Street in New York. And that makes everybody excited, because ESP had shops in Los Angeles, New York, and they actually had another shop in Germany at that time. And what ESP was doing was they were manufacturing full guitars, custom, and they were putting a lot out for consumption, but they were selling parts too. So they were selling necks, and they were selling bodies, and people were able to put together guitars using great quality parts that were sent from Japan to those locations. And Bruce did that, and he used the 3 or 4 of the guitars that we talked about initially, he had built from parts that he bought at the 48th Street shop and the LA shop in the mid 80s, probably 1985.
Here today, though, I mean, you've got the new Kulick guitar, right? Which people can actually purchase. They can, get a guitar which is pretty much. Is it essentially the same guitar he was playing back in the 80s recreated?
The answer is going to be yes, because there was a short period there between 83 and 87 when ESP basically was putting out handmade guitars. So Bruce happened to pick up the right parts. He recognized it obviously as a guitar player that the stuff was great. And so, and it had unique neck shapes, which he liked. When you're a more technical player and you're a guitar player and you understand guitars a little bit, you realize that the size of the frets and the flatness of the fretboard and, you know, the shape of the body and the configuration of the pickups makes a difference to you. So he liked the ESPs, and it just so happens that that was my biggest influence as a luthier and as a guitar maker were the ESP guitars all the way back. I mean, I owned Kramer guitars when I was like 15. So, and all throughout, I wanted to know more. So it was reflected in my own brand. And my brand is really it's sort of a baby that was conceived by Charvel guitars mating with ESP guitars in a lot of ways. And so Bruce, those are his favorite guitars for rock and roll.
Say people are like, wow, they're listening to this and they're thinking, you know what, I want to get myself one of these Kulick guitars. Or they want to check out your guitars, what you've got. Where can they go? Where can they find out all this information?
Well, that's a great question, because if you're looking at getting that Asylum artwork guitar that me and Bruce have done together, and thus far we created 2 of those, and he has them both right now. I'm not sure if he's going to part with those Asylum guitars. And but really what's under that paint job, and just to explain to your customers, I took the artwork from the Asylum record. I took Bruce's face and I recreated it on the guitar body. So if anybody remembers the Asylum album, and that was, I believe that was the first recordings Bruce did with Kiss. And I think he had a 14-year stint as the guitar player for Kiss. So he got an artist created his face, and I took his face and I did the artwork around it so it fits onto a guitar body, and we produced 2 of those. So those, I don't know that those are going to become available anytime real soon, but we're talking about it. But in essence, what that Kulick guitar is an AXN Model 2. And right now I've got 15 of those in production. So you can get an AXN Model 2 with exactly the same specs as Bruce has on his, and the specifications that Bruce likes are just slightly different than what my guitars are, because we're going to get into a longer conversation, but me and Bruce looked at all his guitars from the Kiss era, and we took scientific methods to decipher all the specifications off of those guitars until we reached a point at which he liked it as his personal preferences for a guitar that does rock and roll.
I mean, what kind of price tag are people looking at if they're thinking, I want one of those 15? What area are people looking at?
You're looking at the same price range as you get a custom shop Fender or what do they call master-built Gibson.
Ah, gotcha. And can people go online and take a look and order online for these?
Well, you know, right now I don't even have distributors. I'm taking all my orders online, and the majority of it, really almost all my orders are custom orders.
And where do people go to get to the AXN Guitars website? What's the address?
Thanks for asking for that. It's axnguitars.com. And when you go there, you're going to find a lot more about my guitars. If you go to axnguitars.com, you'll have the ability to look over a lot of the guitars I created, and you're going to be able to contact me, and or if there are things that are available that have been manufactured just to be sold on my site, then they'll say they're available and you can purchase them immediately. So
Johnny DiFatta of the AXN Guitars. You know what, Johnny, it's been great having you on, and best of luck with this project moving forward. And I definitely sense that there's going to be a lot more happening for you and AXN Guitars in the future. And I'm excited for you, man. I think it's very, very cool.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and thank Loaded Radio for having me. And let's see the year turn perfect for us all.
That's Johnny DiFatta from AXN Guitars. Check him out online. And yeah, man, what a hell of a Christmas gift, eh? Would be able to bring one of those suckers home, huh? Oh, so nice, man. Definitely, I recommend checking them out. It's going to do it for the show, though, this week, man. A big one. And thanks for tuning in. We'll be back again with one more episode before we wrap things up for the year, as I'll be talking. Well, I don't want to reveal who it is yet, but we're going to go out in a big way and then come back, of course, in an even bigger way in 2025. So thanks as always for tuning in. Don't forget, check out loadedradio.com for all your hard rock and metal news, including the live 24-hour radio station and past episodes of this very podcast. I'm Scott Penfold for Loaded Radio, and we'll talk to you again next week. Loaded Radio.